The great chamber of the Zephyrian Council fell silent as the holographic display showed another red marker appearing on the star map. Another world had fallen to the Vraktar. Speaker Velnara's blue-scaled hands trembled as she counted the losses. In just 2 cycles, 17 colonies had gone dark. Billions of her people were dead or enslaved. "We cannot hold them back any longer," Commander Thexil reported, his 4 eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. "Our last defense fleet was destroyed at Kepler's Rest. The survivors are fleeing toward the inner systems." Around the curved table, representatives from 7 species sat in stunned silence. The Silmari delegate's water-filled suit bubbled nervously. The insectoid Cathara clicked their mandibles in distress. Even the massive Gorian ambassador, whose people had never known fear, seemed small in his chair. "How many ships do we have left?" Velnara asked, though she already knew the answer would break her heart. 43 combat vessels," Thexil said quietly. "The Vraktar have over 3,000 ships in this sector alone. Our energy shields cannot stop their new weapons. Our particle beams barely scratch their armor. The truth hung in the air like poison. The Zephyrian alliance, which had brought peace to this corner of the galaxy for 1,000 years, was dying. The Vraktar hegemony had swept through the outer rim like a plague, conquering everything in their path. No one could stop them. "We could surrender," suggested the Altarian representative, her crystalline form dimming with despair. "Perhaps they would spare our civilians." "You know what happens to those who surrender," Thexil replied. "The Vraktar do not take prisoners. They take slaves. Their labor camps are worse than death." Velnara stood slowly, her robes rustling in the recycled air. Through the massive windows of the council chamber, she could see refugee ships arriving from the outer worlds. Millions of beings packed into cargo holds, fleeing with nothing but their lives. Children who would never see their home worlds again. "There must be someone who can help us," she said. "The galaxy is vast. Surely there are others with the strength to fight." "We have sent requests to every major power," the Gorian ambassador rumbled. "The Nexus Confederation fears the Vraktar too much to act. The Trade Federation says it is not profitable to fight a war. The others," he spread his massive hands, "the others are too far away or too weak." "What about the restricted sectors?" asked Dr. Yimtar, the Alliance's chief scientist. "There are regions marked as forbidden in the navigation charts. Perhaps civilizations there. Those sectors are quarantined for good reason," Thexil interrupted. "The warnings speak of plague worlds, toxic atmospheres, dangerous radiation. Nothing could live there." Velnara walked to the star map, studying the vast emptiness between the known civilizations. Somewhere out there, beyond the trade routes and colonies, other beings lived among the stars. They had to. "We will send a general distress call," she decided, "an open signal to anyone who might be listening. We will offer everything we have in exchange for military aid." "Speaker," Thexil said carefully, "broadcasting our location to unknown species could be dangerous. We do not know what might answer such a call." Velnara looked at the red markers spreading across their territory like a disease. "Commander, we are already facing extinction. What could be worse than that?" Within an hour, the transmission arrays were ready. Every signal station in Alliance space prepared to broadcast the same message across the galaxy. Velnara stood before the recording devices, knowing these might be among her last words as a free being. "To any civilization receiving this message," she began, "I am Speaker Velnara of the Zephyrian Alliance. We are a peaceful union of 7 species dedicated to knowledge, trade, and cooperation. We have lived in harmony for 1,000 years." She paused, gathering strength. "We are dying. The Vraktar hegemony has invaded our space with overwhelming force. Their technology is superior to ours. Their numbers are too great. In a matter of cycles, they will have conquered our remaining worlds and enslaved our people." The words came easier now, desperation giving her voice power. "We offer everything we have to any who will come to our aid. Our scientific knowledge, our trade routes, our resources. All of this we will share freely. We have technologies that could benefit any civilization. Star charts of unexplored regions, cultural treasures accumulated over millennia." She stepped closer to the camera, her voice becoming more urgent. "But most of all, we offer our friendship to those who would stand with us against tyranny. The Vraktar will not stop with our worlds. They will continue to expand, to conquer, to enslave. Today they threaten us. Tomorrow they may threaten you." The recording ended and the signal began broadcasting across space at faster than light speeds. It would reach the nearest star systems in hours, the far rim of the galaxy in days. Velnara could only hope someone would hear it and care enough to help. Days passed with no response. More worlds fell to the Vraktar advance. Refugee ships continued to arrive, their crews telling horrible stories of orbital bombardments and mass executions. The Alliance fleet made desperate stands at 3 more systems and lost each time. Then, deep in a sector marked with warnings in dozens of languages, something stirred. The signal reached a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star, a world marked in all the star charts as a death trap. Crushing gravity, violent storms, aggressive wildlife, unstable geology. According to every known model of planetary science, complex life should not exist there, yet it did. Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing patrol reports when the communications officer called out. "Captain, we're receiving an alien distress signal." It's asking for military assistance," Chen frowned. Humanity had been exploring space for 3 centuries, but contact with alien civilizations had been limited. Most species avoided human space after learning where they came from. Earth was classified as a death world by galactic standards. "Put it through," she ordered. The message played on the bridge speakers. Chen listened to the desperate plea, studying the star charts that showed the advancing enemy forces. Her crew gathered around, their faces grim as they understood what they were hearing. "Ma'am," her first officer said quietly. "Should we forward this to Earth Command?" Chen was already reaching for the communications panel. "Get me Admiral Rivera on the Defiance, Priority 1. Within hours, the message had reached the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. Admiral Marcus Rivera read the transmission 3 times, studying the tactical data the Zephyrians had included. The enemy was strong, numerous, and ruthless. The aliens asking for help seemed peaceful, outgunned and dying. Rivera called his senior staff together. "Opinions? It's not our fight, sir," said his intelligence chief. "We don't know these aliens. Getting involved could bring this war to human space. The enemy sounds similar to the hegemony we fought at Proxima," his tactical officer countered. "Expansionist, militaristic? They won't stop with these Zephyrians." Rivera nodded slowly. "And if someone had answered our distress calls during the resource wars?" The question hung in the air. Everyone remembered humanity's darkest hour, when the colony worlds had nearly fallen to corporate fleets. No one had come to help then. Humanity had won through determination, sacrifice, and methods that still gave diplomats nightmares. "Set course for Zephyrian space," Rivera ordered. "Full fleet. We're going to help them." His staff exchanged glances. They knew what human help looked like. It involved overwhelming firepower, ruthless tactics, and victory at any cost. The Zephyrians had asked for aid. They were about to discover what they had really called down upon their enemies. The emergency alarm screamed through the bridge of the Zephyrian Defense Station Harmony's Edge. Commander Thexil rushed to the sensor station, his 4 eyes scanning the displays with growing dread. 3 dozen ships had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, right where the Vraktar usually appeared before an attack. "Unknown vessels approaching," reported sensor operator. "Kindala?" Her voice tight with fear. "Configuration unknown. They're not broadcasting Vraktar identification codes." Thexil felt a spark of hope. "Could they be reinforcements from the inner systems?" "Negative, sir. These ships, they don't match any design in our database. The energy signatures are completely foreign." On the main screen, the mysterious fleet grew larger as it approached. The ships were ugly by Zephyrian standards, angular, heavily armored, bristling with weapon ports. They looked like they had been built for war and nothing else. "Sir?" Kindala said, her voice shaking. "One of the ships is trying to communicate. It's using our emergency frequency. Put it through." The screen flickered, then displayed something that made several bridge officers gasp. The being looking back at them was clearly alien, but disturbingly familiar. It had 2 eyes instead of 4, pale pink skin instead of scales, and strange fur covering the top of its head. But the shape was almost Zephyrian. 2 arms, 2 legs, a single head. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiance," the creature said in accented but understandable galactic standard. "We received your distress call. We're here to help." Thexil stared at the image. "Earth? I've never heard of that world. What species are you?" "We call ourselves humans. Our homeworld is in what you probably classify as Sector 47 Gamma, the one marked as a death world in your navigation charts. Several bridge officers exchanged worried glances. Deathworlds were planets so hostile that no rational species would attempt to colonize them. Crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, violent weather, any one of these would make a world uninhabitable. Planets marked as Deathworlds usually had all of them. That's impossible, Thexil said. Our scientists have studied those worlds. They cannot support complex life. Captain Chen smiled, showing rows of sharp white teeth. Your scientists never met us. Permission to come aboard? We need to coordinate our response to the Vraktar threat. Sir, whispered his communications officer, should we trust them? We know nothing about these humans. Thexil thought about the refugee ships fleeing through their system, about the 23 worlds that had already fallen to the Vraktar. Do we have a choice? Grant permission to dock. An hour later, Thexil stood in the main docking bay watching a human shuttle land. The craft was built like a weapon, sleek and dangerous. When the airlock opened, 6 humans emerged wearing form-fitting combat armor that made them look like predators. Captain Chen was smaller than Thexil had expected, but she moved with a confidence that reminded him of the great hunters from his homeworld. Behind her came other humans, a tall male with dark skin and calculating eyes, a female with red hair and scars on her hands, others whose very presence seemed to charge the air with tension. Commander Thexil? Chen extended her hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Thexil cautiously touched his hand to hers, surprised by the firmness of her grip. Captain Chen, I must ask, how did you receive our transmission so quickly? It should have taken cycles to reach your space. We were already in the region, Chen replied. Our 3rd Expeditionary Fleet has been exploring this sector for months. When we heard your call for help, Admiral Rivera decided to respond immediately. Expeditionary Fleet? Thexil felt a chill. You mean a military force? Exploration and defense, the tall male said, stepping forward. I'm Colonel Martinez, Marine Commander. We heard you were having trouble with an aggressive species. They made their way to the briefing room, where Thexil had prepared displays showing the current tactical situation. The humans studied the information with intense focus, occasionally asking questions that made him uncomfortable. These Vraktar, Chen said, they target civilian populations. Yes, unfortunately. They seem to believe that terrorizing non-combatants will force us to surrender more quickly. Standard doctrine for bullies, Martinez muttered. How many ships do they usually attack with? Fleets of 50 to 100 vessels. Their technology is superior to ours in every way. Our energy shields cannot stop their plasma cannons. Our particle beams barely damage their armor. Chen and Martinez exchanged glances. What about their supply lines? Chen asked. Supply lines? Where do they get fuel, ammunition, spare parts? How do they maintain their ships so far from home? Thexil blinked, all 4 eyes in confusion. We never considered attacking their support vessels. That would be against the conventions of civilized warfare. The humans stared at him. The what? Martinez asked. The conventions. The galaxy-wide agreements on proper conduct during conflicts. You don't attack non-military targets, you allow enemy survivors to evacuate. You negotiate ransoms for captured officers. And the Vraktar follow these conventions? Chen asked. Well, no, but that doesn't mean we should abandon our principles. My Commander, Chen said gently, with respect, these aren't games. This is war. Your people are dying. I understand that, but we cannot become like our enemies. If we abandon our moral code, what are we fighting to preserve? The red-haired human spoke for the first time. Your lives. You're fighting to preserve your lives. Her voice carried the weight of hard experience. Admiral Rivera arrived on the station the next day, bringing with him tactical specialists and intelligence officers. Thexil found the human leader both impressive and terrifying. Rivera was older than the others, with gray hair and eyes that seemed to have seen too much war. Commander, Rivera said as they met in the strategy room, I've reviewed your situation. The good news is that the Vraktar can be beaten. The bad news is that you'll need to change how you fight. What do you mean? Rivera activated a holographic display showing the local sector. You've been fighting defensively, trying to protect every world. That's admirable, but it's also suicidal when you're outnumbered. We need to go on the offensive, attack the Vraktar, but our forces are barely adequate for defense, not their fleets. Their infrastructure, their supply depots, their command ships, their staging areas. Hit them where they're weak, make them react to us instead of driving us back. Thexil felt sick. That would mean abandoning some worlds to save others, leaving millions of our people at the mercy of the Vraktar. It means saving billions instead of losing everyone, Rivera replied firmly. War isn't about protecting everything. It's about winning. Admiral, Thexel said carefully, your methods seem very aggressive. Are all human conflicts fought this way? Rivera was quiet for a moment. Commander, my people have been at war with someone for most of our history. Sometimes with each other. Sometimes with nature, sometimes with forces that wanted to wipe us out. We've learned that there's only one rule that matters. Winners get to keep their families alive. But surely there must be limits. Rules of engagement, protection for non-combatants, of course, Rivera said. We protect civilians whenever possible. We follow our own moral code. But that code is built around one simple principle. Evil wins when good people refuse to fight dirty. Thexel struggled to understand. These humans offered hope, but their methods challenged everything he believed about civilized behavior. If we fight like them, how are we better than the Vraktar? Captain Chen answered. Because we're fighting to protect people, not to conquer them. Because when the war is over, we'll go home and let you rebuild in peace. And because sometimes, Commander, the only thing that can stop a monster is someone willing to be more monstrous. As the humans prepared their battle plans, Thexel realized that his people had called for help and received exactly what they asked for. The question was whether they could live with the consequences of being saved by a species that treated war as a science, rather than an unfortunate necessity. Outside the station's windows, the human fleet waited in perfect formation, deadly, efficient, and ready to teach the galaxy what happened when someone threatened their new allies. The attack came at dawn, ship's time. Commander Thexel watched the tactical display as 60 Vraktar vessels dropped out of hyperspace near Sanctum Prime, home to the Alliance's military academy. It was exactly the kind of target they always hit. Symbolic, important, and lightly defended. Vraktar fleet forming up in standard attack formation, reported his sensor officer. They're preparing to bombard the academy from orbit. Thexel opened the communication channel to the human fleet, which had positioned itself in the outer system. Admiral Rivera, enemy forces have arrived. 59 ships, heavy cruiser class and above. Confirmed, Commander. Begin your defensive maneuvers. Draw them in. The Zephyrian fleet moved forward in their traditional shield wall formation. 12 ships arranged in a perfect line, energy barriers overlapping to create maximum protection. It was a formation that had served them well for centuries, allowing smaller forces to hold off larger ones through superior defensive technology. The Vraktar responded exactly as expected. Their ships spread into a wide arc, preparing to overwhelm the Zephyrian line with concentrated fire. Their commander, War Prime Kethvar, had destroyed dozens of Alliance fleets using this same tactic. Human fleet is moving, the sensor officer announced. They're retreating? Thexel felt his heart sink as he watched the human ships turn away from the battle, accelerating toward the edge of the system. They were abandoning the fight before it even began. Admiral Rivera, he called desperately. Where are you going? We need support. Stick to the plan, Commander. Keep their attention focused on you. What plan? You're leaving us to die. On the main screen, the Vraktar ships opened fire. Brilliant streams of plasma crashed against the Zephyrian shields, draining their power with each hit. The Alliance ships returned fire with their particle beams, but the enemy armor absorbed most of the damage. Shields at 60%, his tactical officer reported. We can't hold this position much longer. Thexel was about to order a retreat when his sensor officer gasped. Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the asteroid belt. Something's moving out there. The tactical display updated, showing new contacts emerging from behind the rocky debris that circled Sanctum Prime's star. The human fleet hadn't retreated. They had used the asteroids for cover, positioning themselves for a flanking attack. All Vraktar ships, new contacts bearing 77 Mark IV, came an urgent transmission from the enemy fleet. Unknown vessels approaching from the asteroid field. War Prime Kethvar snarled as he studied the display. These new ships were moving in ways that defied military logic. Instead of maintaining formation, they were scattered throughout the asteroid belt, using the rocks for cover like ground-based soldiers. Impossible, he muttered. No species fights in 3 dimensions like this. The first human attack came from an unexpected angle. Captain Chen's Defiance emerged from behind a large asteroid, firing what appeared to be simple kinetic rounds. The Vraktar commander dismissed them as primitive weapons until the first impact struck his ships. The simple rounds were actually asteroids, accelerated to near-light speed by human mass drivers. When they hit Vraktar shields, they didn't just drain power. They punched straight through, creating massive holes in the energy barriers. What kind of weapons are those? Kethvar demanded. Unknown technology, War Prime. The projectiles appear to be naturally occurring rocks, but they're moving at impossible velocities. More human ships appeared, each one firing from a different location. They weren't trying to overwhelm the Vraktar with superior firepower. They were using the environment itself as a weapon. Asteroids became missiles, gas clouds became cover, and the complex orbital mechanics of the system became part of their battle plan. The Vraktar formation began to break apart as ships turned to face threats from multiple directions. Their neat attack line dissolved into chaos as human forces struck from above, below, and behind. "This is impossible," Kethvar's tactical officer reported. "They're fighting like they grew up in asteroid fields. No shipborne species should understand three-dimensional combat this well." Admiral Rivera's voice cut through the battle communications. "All ships execute pattern Delta. Target their life support systems." The human attack pattern shifted. Instead of targeting shields or weapons, they began hitting seemingly random sections of Vraktar ships. Within minutes, enemy vessels were venting atmosphere, their crew struggling to seal hull breaches while fighting for their lives. "They're targeting our life support," a Vraktar captain screamed over the radio. "This is against the conventions. You cannot attack life support systems." Captain Chen's response was calm and cold. "What conventions? You started this war by murdering civilians." Thexel watched in amazement and horror as the human tactics unfolded. They were fighting like nothing he had ever seen. Not as spaceborne beings conducting civilized warfare, but as predators who had learned to kill in an environment that was constantly trying to kill them. Colonel Martinez led a boarding action against the Vraktar flagship, his Marines using personal jump packs to cross open space between ships. The idea of leaving the safety of their vessels to fight hand-to-hand was so alien to Vraktar, thinking that their defense systems weren't even designed to stop it. "Borders away." Martinez's voice crackled over the comm. 15 minutes to secure the bridge, sir," Thexel's communications officer said quietly. "I'm receiving surrender requests from 17 Vraktar ships. Tell them to power down weapons and prepare to be boarded," Admiral Rivera responded. "What about prisoners?" The conventions died when they started bombing refugee ships," Rivera cut him off. "Any ship that surrenders will be spared. Any ship that continues fighting will be destroyed." The battle lasted another 20 minutes. When it ended, the entire Vraktar fleet was either destroyed or captured. Not a single human ship had been lost, though several showed damage from debris impacts. Thexel stared at the aftermath displayed on his screens. The space around Sanctum Prime was filled with wreckage, debris, and the life pods of surviving Vraktar crew members. In 4 hours, the humans had accomplished what the Alliance hadn't managed in 2 years of warfare. "Admiral Rivera," he called, "requesting permission to come aboard your ship. We need to discuss what just happened." An hour later, Thexel stood on the bridge of the Defiance, surrounded by human officers who looked like they had just finished a routine training exercise. No one seemed shaken by the violence or the complete destruction of an enemy fleet. "I don't understand," he said to Admiral Rivera. "Your tactics, they're completely outside established military doctrine. How did you learn to fight like this?" Rivera gestured to the main screen, which showed Earth rotating slowly in space. "That world down there has been trying to kill everything on it for 4 billion years. Storms that can level cities, earthquakes that split continents, predators that hunt in packs, diseases that wipe out entire populations. My species survived by learning to fight everything. The environment, other animals, each other. But the boarding actions, the environmental warfare, the kinetic bombardment, standard human tactics," Captain Chen said. "We've been fighting in 3 dimensions since we lived in trees. We've been using tools as weapons since we discovered rocks could break things. Space combat isn't new to us, it's just a bigger battlefield." Thexel struggled to process what he was hearing. "Your entire species was shaped by warfare?" "Not warfare," Rivera corrected. "Survival. War's just applied survival when someone tries to keep you from existing. But what about morality? Ethics, the protection of non-combatants?" "We have those," Rivera said firmly. But we also understand that sometimes the only way to protect innocent people is to be absolutely ruthless with those who threaten them. Colonel Martinez joined the conversation, his armor still scorched from the boarding action. Commander, how many of your people died today? None, thanks to your intervention. And how many Vraktar civilians did we kill? Thexel checked his displays. None. Your attacks targeted only military vessels. Then we followed our moral code, Martinez said. We protected your innocent people by removing the threat to them. But the complete destruction of their fleet sends a message, Rivera finished. Attack the Alliance and you face us. That message will save more lives than any number of civilized battles that drag on for years. As Thexel prepared to return to his ship, he realized that everything had changed. The humans had won them a great victory, but they had also shown the galaxy something new. What happened when a species evolved for survival rather than cooperation? The question now was whether the rest of the Alliance could learn to live with their terrifying new protectors, and whether the Vraktar would be smart enough to recognize that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. In the distance, human ships were already moving toward their next target, carrying with them the promise of victory and the threat of total war. The Vraktar High Command gathered in their war chamber deep beneath the surface of their homeworld. Warmaster Zekroth studied the reports with growing disbelief. In 3 weeks, 7 fleets had been completely destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. No survivors, no ships returning home, nothing but debris fields and panicked distress calls. These humans fight like demons, reported Intelligence Coordinator Velmark, her scaled hide pale with fear. They use weapons we've never seen before. They attack from directions that should be impossible. They show no mercy to those who surrender. That last part is incorrect, Zekroth said, checking his datapad. 17 ships from the Sanctum engagement were captured, not destroyed. The crews are being held prisoner, which makes them even more dangerous, Velmark replied. They follow some rules but ignore others. We cannot predict their behavior. Warmaster Krell slammed his fist on the table, making the holographic displays flicker. I don't care if they're demons or gods. They're protecting the Alliance worlds, which means they're standing between us and our expansion goals. We need to adapt our tactics. Adapt how? Asked Fleet Commander Torvin. Our ships are superior to anything the Alliance has. Our weapons can cut through their shields like they don't exist. But these humans, he gestured helplessly. They don't fight like spacefaring species. They fight like land predators who learn to use starships. Zekroth activated the tactical display, showing the current war situation. The human intervention had changed everything. Alliance worlds that should have fallen weeks ago were now secure. Vraktar supply lines were under constant attack. Most disturbing of all, the Alliance forces were beginning to adopt human tactics. We need to force them into the kind of battle we can win, he decided. Target civilian populations directly. Make the cost of resistance too high for them to bear. The other commanders exchanged glances. Attacking non-combatants was considered barbaric even by Vraktar standards, though they had done it before when necessary. Sir, Velmark said carefully, if we escalate to targeting civilians, the humans may respond in kind. Their weapons could devastate our colonies. Let them try, Zekroth snarled. We'll show the galaxy that their protectors are just another aggressive species. Begin Operation Cleansing Fire immediately. Meanwhile, in Alliance space, the changes were causing deep divisions among the member species. In the Great Assembly Hall on Zephyr Prime, representatives argued bitterly about the future of their civilization. We're losing our souls, declared Speaker Yimtar of the traditional faction, her crystalline form flickering with agitation. These humans are teaching us to be killers. Is survival worth becoming monsters? Commander Thexil, now promoted to Alliance Defense Coordinator, stood to respond. With respect, Speaker, our souls won't matter if we're all dead or enslaved. The humans aren't teaching us to be monsters, they're teaching us to be effective. At what cost? Demanded the Silmari representative. My people have observed their training sessions. They practice killing techniques that would make Vraktar soldiers sick. They speak of warfare like it's a science. Because it is a science here, said Captain Chen, who had been invited to address the assembly. War isn't about honor or glory or proving who's morally superior. It's about making the other side stop fighting. Everything else is just decoration. The debate was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Outer Rim. Fleet Captain Zermoth appeared on the main screen, his uniform torn and his face marked by burns. "The Vraktar have attacked New Haven," he reported, his voice shaking. "Not the military installations, the civilian evacuation centers. Millions dead. They're broadcasting a message saying they'll destroy every Alliance world unless we surrender within 10 cycles." The assembly fell silent. New Haven was a sanctuary world, protected by ancient treaties. No military installations, no strategic value, just refugees and the medical facilities caring for them. Speaker Yimtar stared at the screen in horror. "They attacked a hospital world? 17 hospitals, 43 schools, and a refugee processing center," Zermoth confirmed. "They specifically targeted the areas with the highest civilian populations." Admiral Rivera's image appeared on a secondary screen. "Alliance Council, this is Admiral Rivera of the 3rd Fleet. We've received the Vraktar ultimatum. What are your orders?" The assembly erupted in angry voices. Some called for immediate surrender to save lives. Others demanded revenge. Speaker Yimtar raised her hand for silence. "Admiral," she said quietly, "what would you do if it were human civilians who had been murdered?" Rivera's expression was grim. "Ma'am, if someone targeted human civilians, we would make sure they regretted it for whatever time they had left to live." "Then do what you think is necessary," she replied. "We place ourselves under your protection." "Understood." The Vraktar just made this war personal. Within hours, human forces were moving throughout Vraktar space, but instead of attacking military targets, they focused on something entirely different: infrastructure. Power plants, communication arrays, resource extraction facilities, shipyards, everything that kept Vraktar civilization running. The attacks were precise and devastating. Human cyber warfare specialists, trained in the brutal information wars of Earth's corporate period, infiltrated Vraktar networks and turned their own systems against them. Factory planets found their automated systems producing defective parts. Transport ships discovered their navigation computers had been programmed with incorrect star charts. Colonel Martinez led a special operations team that infiltrated 3 major Vraktar worlds, planning devices that would disrupt their fusion reactors if activated. The message was clear: escalate again and your home worlds would lose power for decades. But it was the psychological warfare that proved most effective. Human hackers began broadcasting something unprecedented in galactic warfare: evidence. Video recordings of Vraktar atrocities, transmitted on every frequency to every world in their empire. Civilians who had never questioned their government's expansion suddenly saw the true cost of their conquests. The effect was immediate. Protests erupted on Vraktar colony worlds. Several border systems declared independence rather than continue supporting the war. For the first time in their history, the hegemony faced internal rebellion. How are they doing this? War Master Zekroth demanded as he watched his empire begin to fracture. Psychological warfare on this scale should be impossible. "They're not just fighting our military," Velmark reported. "They're fighting our entire civilization. They understand that wars are won in the minds of the people, not just on battlefields." It was then that intelligence discovered something that changed their entire perspective on the conflict. Deep in the classified files retrieved from a captured human ship, they found historical records that made their blood freeze. "War Master," Velmark said, her voice barely a whisper, "I think we need to see this. It's their history." The holographic display showed a blue-green world, the human homeworld. But the records weren't of space exploration or technological advancement. They were casualty reports from wars that made Vraktar conflicts look like minor disputes. 60 million dead in something called World War II, Velmark read. Multiple conflicts with casualties in the tens of millions. They've been fighting wars of extinction against their own species for their entire recorded history. "That's impossible," Zekroth said. "No species could survive that level of internal warfare." "Unless," Velmark said slowly, "warfare made them stronger instead of weaker. Look at this. They call it natural selection through conflict. The survivors of each war were better at fighting than the ones who died. The implications hit the war room like a shockwave. They weren't fighting a normal species that had learned warfare. They were fighting a species that had been shaped by millions of years of combat, where only the most effective killers survived to reproduce. "We need to end this war," Zekroth said quietly. "Now, before they decide we're a threat to their existence." But it was already too late. In human space, Admiral Rivera was reading intelligence reports about Vraktar forces massing near the galactic core. The attacks on Alliance civilians hadn't been desperation. They had been preparation for something worse. "Admiral," Captain Chen reported, "our deep scouts have found evidence of Vraktar military buildup in Sector 12, but sir, they're not building up to attack us. They're building defenses against something else, something that's been chasing them from the core worlds." Rivera studied the data, his face growing pale. "How long have the Vraktar been running from something?" "According to these star charts, at least 50 years. They're not conquerors, sir. They're refugees, and whatever they're running from is still coming." The revelation changed everything. The war that had seemed like simple aggression was actually a desperate flight from something even worse. The humans had stopped the Vraktar expansion, but in doing so, they might have doomed the galaxy to face whatever had driven the hegemony from their original home. In the distance, beyond the reach of current sensors, something vast and hungry continued its slow advance toward the rim, following the trail of destruction left by those who fled before it. The Vraktar homeworld of Kethvar Prime had never seen foreign ships in its orbit. For 1,000 years it had been the untouchable heart of the hegemony, protected by layers of defense fleets and orbital fortresses. Now it hung defenseless as the human fleet approached. War Master Zekroth stood in his command center, watching the alien ships take positions around his world. The humans had destroyed his outer defenses in a matter of hours, not through overwhelming force, but through tactics that his strategists still couldn't understand. "Incoming transmission," his communications officer announced. "Admiral." Rivera's face appeared on the main screen, his expression calm but implacable. "War Master Zekroth, I am Admiral Marcus Rivera of the Terran Third Fleet. You have two options: surrender unconditionally and face trial for war crimes, or watch your homeworld become an asteroid field." Zekroth's scaled hide flushed with anger. "You would destroy an entire world? Billions of innocent civilians?" "No," Rivera replied. "We would remove every military installation, government building, and weapons facility on your planet with surgical precision. Your civilians would be unharmed, but your ability to wage war would be permanently ended. You're bluffing. No species has weapons accurate enough to—" Rivera gestured to someone off-screen. "Captain Chen, demonstrate." The massive government complex 2 kilometers away vanished in a flash of light. No explosion, no mushroom cloud. It simply ceased to exist, leaving a perfectly circular crater where the center of Vraktar power had stood for centuries. "That was a kinetic bombardment from orbit," Rivera explained calmly. "A tungsten rod accelerated to 90% of light speed. We have 1,000 more in our launch tubes, targeted at every military facility on your planet. You have 60 seconds to decide." Zekroth stared at the crater that had once housed the High Command. The precision was impossible. They had destroyed a building without damaging structures on the same block. "Sir," his aide whispered, "our deep space sensors are detecting the approach signatures. The Devourers are less than 5 cycles away from the rim. If we surrender now—" "I know," Zekroth said quietly. He activated the general communication system, broadcasting to every Vraktar world. "All forces of the hegemony, this is War Master Zekroth. I hereby order the immediate and unconditional surrender of all military forces." The war is over. 6 months later, the galaxy was still adjusting to its new reality. The Terran Protectorate had replaced the Vraktar hegemony as the dominant military power, but their methods were completely different. Instead of conquest, they offered protection. Instead of tribute, they requested trade agreements. Commander Thexil, now Admiral Thexil of the reformed Alliance Defense Force, stood in the renovated command center on Zephyr Prime. Through the windows, he could see human and Alliance ships training together, their joint exercises teaching Zephyrian crews how to fight like their protectors. "Admiral," his aide announced, "the human ambassador is here for the weekly briefing." Captain Chen entered the room, now wearing the insignia of a diplomatic attaché. The transformation from warrior to negotiator still amazed Thexil, though he had learned that humans were capable of rapid adaptation. "Captain," he greeted her, "how are the integration protocols proceeding?" "Better than expected," she replied, reviewing her datapad. 47 species have requested Protectorate membership. Trade routes are operating at 130% of pre-war capacity. The reconstruction of damaged worlds is ahead of schedule. And the war crimes trials? Chen's expression darkened slightly. Zekroth and his senior staff will be sentenced next week. Most likely life imprisonment on a penal colony. The rank-and-file soldiers are being released after completing rehabilitation programs. Thexel nodded. The human approach to justice was as pragmatic as their approach to warfare. Harsh for leaders who ordered atrocities, but merciful to those who simply followed orders. There's something else, Chen said. Admiral Rivera wants to discuss the deep space monitoring stations. We're getting some unusual readings from the core sectors. They made their way to the strategic planning room, where Admiral Rivera waited with a collection of sensor data that made Thexil's hearts skip. The displays showed something emerging from the galactic core. Ships, if they could be called that. They were massive, organic-looking, and moving in formations that suggested intelligence. The Devourers, Rivera said without preamble. The Vraktar were running from them for 50 years. Now they're coming this way, and they're not interested in negotiation. Thexil studied the readings. The ship's creatures were the size of cities, and there were thousands of them. What do we know about them? Very little, Rivera admitted. The Vraktar records are fragmentary, but what we have suggests they consume entire ecosystems. They strip worlds bare of all organic matter, then move on to the next system. How long do we have? 3 months, maybe 4, before they reach the outer rim. 6 months before they threaten Alliance space. Chen activated another display showing the current disposition of human and Alliance forces. We have 200 ships total, counting everything from destroyers to command carriers. Intelligence suggests the Devourers have over 10,000 vessels. The numbers were staggering. Even with human tactical superiority, they would be facing odds of 50 to 1 against an enemy that had driven the Vraktar, no cowards themselves, into panicked flight. Recommendations? Thexil asked. We fight, Rivera said simply. We can't run, there's nowhere to go. We can't hide. They seem to find everything eventually. So we make our stand here and show them what happens when predators meet apex predators. Admiral, Thexil said carefully, the Vraktar had a 1,000-year head start on military technology. If they couldn't stop these Devourers. The Vraktar never fought like humans, Chen interrupted. They followed conventional military doctrine. We don't. Rivera brought up a tactical display of the Outer Rim systems. We're going to do something the Vraktar never tried. Instead of meeting them in open space, we're going to turn entire star systems into weapons. The plan that unfolded over the next hour was audacious beyond anything Thexil had imagined. The humans proposed using stellar engineering to weaponize stars themselves, creating solar flares that could fry ships across entire systems. They would seed asteroid belts with nuclear devices, turning space debris into massive fragmentation bombs. Most ambitious of all, they wanted to destabilize the orbit of gas giants, turning them into kinetic weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. This is madness, Thexil said when the briefing ended. You're talking about using the laws of physics as weapons. We're talking about survival, Rivera replied. And humans are very good at survival. Word of the approaching threat spread throughout the galaxy. Some species fled toward the outer rim, hoping to escape. Others offered their ships and crews to the Protectorate Defense Forces. A few, including several former Vraktar colonies, volunteered for the most dangerous missions. The War Crimes Tribunal had just finished sentencing Zekroth when an unexpected visitor arrived at the detention facility. Admiral Rivera stood outside the former War Master's cell, studying the being who had once threatened to destroy the Alliance. You've come to gloat? Zekroth asked bitterly. I've come to offer you a choice, Rivera replied. The Devourers are coming. We need every experienced military mind we can get. Fight with us and your sentence will be commuted to exile. Refuse and you can watch the galaxy burn from your cell. Zekroth looked up in surprise. You would trust me after everything? Trust? No, but I'll use you. The question is whether you care more about your pride or your species' survival. The former War Master was silent for a long moment. What would you have me do? Tell us everything you know about the Devourers. Help us understand how they fight, how they think, how they can be killed. And if we lose? Rivera smiled grimly. Then we'll lose fighting. But Zekroth, I want you to understand something. Humans have been facing extinction for millions of years. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and wars that should have ended our species. We're still here. The Devourers are different. They're not just another enemy. Neither are we, Rivera interrupted. The galaxy is about to learn what it really means to poke a Deathworld species. As the Admiral left, Zekaroth realized that despite everything, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: hope. The humans were terrifying, but they were terrifying in the right direction, and perhaps, just perhaps, that would be enough. In the depths of space, the first human deep space monitoring stations detected the advanced scouts of the Devourer fleet. The readings confirmed their worst fears. The approaching entities were even larger and more numerous than the Vraktar records had suggested. But among the human fleet, there was no panic. Only preparation. They had answered the Alliance's desperate plea for help and found themselves protectors of an entire galactic civilization. Now they would discover whether a species evolved for survival could teach the universe itself what it meant to fight for existence. The real war was about to begin.